Harry Howe/Getty Images. They raised their fists and lifted signs, shouted words of support for Colin Kaepernick and words of shame toward the National Football League. Hundreds of people gathered late last month for a rally in support of the most talked about man in American sports, a man who wasn't there to speak about himself. And maybe that last part doesn't matter anymore. He's out there kneeling for my son and your son and my daughter, Simone Sanders remembered one of the speakers saying. Sanders, the former press secretary for Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, and an organizer of the Kaepernick rally at the NFL's Midtown Manhattan headquarters, believed she would remember that feeling for a long time. The crowd was just overtaken with emotion at that moment, and everybody understood that this was absolutely bigger than Colin Kaepernick. A little more than a year ago, Kaepernick became one of the most polarizing figures in U.S. sports when he took a knee during the national anthem. It was a unique and jarring form of protest against police brutality toward African Americans. If they take football away, I know that I stood for what is right, he told NFL Network in August 2016, during the kind of interview that has become increasingly rare in the years since. And sure enough, that seems to be exactly what happened. With the NFL kicking off a new season without Kaepernick on a team roster, it's possible the protest has cost him his playing career. The 29-year-old quarterback led the San Francisco 49ers to the Super Bowl following the 2012 season, and while his statistics have declined since, his performance, he threw 16 touchdown passes last season against 4 interceptions, would seem to warrant a job somewhere in the league, at the very least as a reserve. No one wants to deal with that, said an owner of one of the league's 32 franchises, none of which offered Kaepernick a contract this offseason, and the estrangement is in keeping with most everything else about the young man's life. The owner spoke on the condition of anonymity so as to give a frank opinion on a topic that is extremely sensitive for the NFL at just the latest of many crossroads. Kaepernick is a lifelong resident of the in-between, not exactly a football player and not quite an activist. He's refused the past 8 months to appear publicly or conduct interviews, including for this story. He is a biracial man who grew up in a white family, a child of privilege who became a warrior for social justice, an introspective soul who couldn't resist his callings to the most public stages. One day, maybe my youngest, who is in 2nd grade, is going to open up a history book and he'll read about Colin, said Phil Sanchez, Kaepernick's former high school guidance counselor. And it won't have anything to do with throwing a touchdown. His stance is now a heated rallying cry on both sides of the political aisle. His number 7 49ers jersey is still one of the best-selling in a league that will not have him, and a memento to burn by fans who don't want him. Kaepernick is more than just an athlete these days. He is a symbol and a dramatic example, either the second coming of Muhammad Ali, the legendary boxer who shook up the world and the national conversation by refusing a draft assignment to Vietnam, or a spoiled athlete who refused to stick to sports and oblige a culture that allowed him 3 years ago to sign a $126 million contract. He is, on either end of an extreme spectrum, a figure who generates passion and devotion, the author of a movement that has grown larger and more heated than perhaps even Kaepernick thought it would. He had no idea how big it was going to get, said Nate Boyer, an ex-Green Beret who has occasionally communicated with Kaepernick over the past year. Not long after the newborn settled into his new parents' arms, the adoption agent wanted to be clear on what they'd be taking on. The baby was a boy. He was 5 weeks old. And he was, Rick and Teresa Kaepernick weren't old, a special needs child. The couple had lost 2 biological sons to heart ailments. Baby Lance lived 23 days, and Kent made it only 4. Now this. What's wrong with him? Rick Wood, in a 2007 article published in the Reno, Nevada, Gazette-Journal, recall asking the agent, who said the boy was biracial, the son of an African American father and a teenage white mother. Unfazed, the couple signed the papers and took baby Colin home. Almost from the start, the boy's parents were honest. Yes, he was adopted. No, unlike his parents and older siblings, Kyle and Devin are the Kaepernick's biological children. He was not white. Colin drew pictures of his family, yellow crayons for his family and a brown one for himself, and came of age acutely aware of how different he was. His hometown, Turlock, California, is a suburb of Modesto. The 2000 census found 1.45% of the city's nearly 56,000 residents was black. One preschool the family,